Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are commemorating the final month of this summer. Summer 2022. What a ride. Last summer, we were thinking, can movies survive to summer 2021? And here we are in 2022, asking literally the exact same question.
Can movies survive? Yes, yeah. I was wondering where you were going with that.
So that's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be doing not an in-depth review like you're used to. We're actually going to be doing a series of short little mini discussions covering a few of the biggest movies from this past month. The three we'll highlight are Prey, Bullet Train, and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. But we're also going to do a little round-robin discussion at the end where we kind of go through a few of the other films that we've seen in kind of rapid-fire form. We're going to start by diving into each of those three movies that I just mentioned, and then we'll close out the conversation by maybe teasing what movie we're looking forward to this fall, movie or movies. And I'm so thankful. We've got a great group today just to talk about what I think maybe light on the theatrical side, but I think was actually a pretty stellar month of movies in terms of just like the stories they're putting out there, even if they weren't all blockbusters. So joining me today, of course, recurring guest host, LaRon Chapman, award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker. Sir, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's like a cinematic buffet, if you will.
Exactly. We did one of these in November, so I thought it seemed to go pretty well. So I thought it might be worth trying again this summer.
For sure.
And also, rejoining us today is an Oklahoma filmmaker here. He actually has worked on a number of different films. He's a member of the Oklahoma Film Critics Circle as well. Charles Elmore. Charles, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to get to join you guys. And I, of course, love talking about all this. So I'm here for it and excited. Thank you for having me.
Oh, always a pleasure. And again, Charles, just love seeing, again, I know we're going to talk socials down the road, but I love your Instagram game and just all the things you're sharing from either different sites you're seeing as a DP or just different film sets you're working on. So again, pleasure speaking with you, and thanks for taking the time out of your day.
Absolutely.
And last, but certainly not least, we have returning guest host from Good Trash Media and the co-host of the Good Trash genre cast, Dalton Stewart. Dalton, welcome back, sir.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you.
It's been a good month for movies, Dalton.
It has. It's sort of a harbinger of bad times to come, unfortunately. This is the first time in 15 years. Apparently, we're slated to not have a movie expected to open at north of $25 million. Not until Halloween Ends comes out in October. So it's good that August went hard because it does seem like we're in for a bit of a drought.
It is going to be the drought. Hopefully not to end all droughts, but it's looking pretty light, even for promising film, artistically speaking, films that look potentially promising.
Sure.
But
there's a couple of things I'm excited about.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of butts and seats, it's looking pretty rough.
Pretty dismal.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get to today's discussion, I just wanted to quickly note, listeners, that if you are listening to the show for the first time and you enjoy our conversation, please support us by subscribing to the show and leaving us a rating or review on your preferred podcast app. This is, of course, most relevant on Spotify, where we can now leave ratings, or on Apple Podcasts, where you can leave us not only a rating in the app, but you can also write us a short blurb in the form of a review and say, Cinematic Schematic's great, or Cinematic Schematic's trash, or Caleb is not nearly as good as LaRon. Whatever you want to put in the review is totally fine, because if you put that in there, it's going to help us get discovered by more listeners like you. So, gentlemen, we have a lot of grounds to cover, so let's just go ahead and jump right into the first film at hand today, which is Prey.
There's something out there. I'm coming with you.
You can't.
I'm trying to protect you.
Protect me from what? It's time.
So according to IMDb, Prey is described as the origin story of the Predator and the world of the Comanche Nation 300 years ago. Nadu, a skilled warrior, fights to protect her tribe against one of the first highly evolved predators to land on Earth. This film was released exclusively on Hulu on August 5th. And I just want to go around the table here just to get some quick thoughts on what we thought or liked or didn't like about the film. So, LaRon, kick us off here.
Yeah, Prey was kind of a pleasant surprise for me, and in some ways it shouldn't be, because, I mean, given that it's directed by Dan Trachtenberg, and I've liked his previous work. But given the string of like lackluster sequels that we've had over the last 30 years, I haven't been presently watching those movies for 30 years because I'm in my 30s. But Save for Predators, I'd say, as being like, a B-level one that I did have some fun with, even if it's not perfect.
Predators is pretty cool.
I was gonna.
I'm glad you shouted it out.
Yeah, two things. One, just to clarify for listeners, because there's a lot of confusion about the naming. Predators was the one that was 2010, 2011, starring Adrian Brody, and it was basically
no. Shane Black one's 2018.
No, that was Nimrod Antle.
Yeah. Nimrod did the 2010 Predators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's basically drop a bunch of killers into an arena to be hunted by predators. Yeah,
yeah.
But that being said, I am surprised how well done Prey is, considering it. Like at this point in time, we don't necessarily need this movie, so that it was so successful, on screen, was surprising for me. So, yeah.
All right, pretty positive. So we've got one thumbs up. Dalton Stewart, what'd you think?
Yeah, I'm a big. It's a damn shame that this didn't go to theaters. Trachtenberg and co. Didn't have to go this hard, and they sure did.
Talk about butts and seats. This could have done it. I think it could have been.
Absolutely,
Yes.
this would have done great. Now there is the possibility that this actually got seen by more folks on opening weekend because it opened on streaming. So there's that to consider. But I think this could have got asses and seats. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of this. I haven't watched 1987's Predator from John McTiernan in a while. I am very curious to revisit it post watching Prey, though, because it is such a lean and mean creature feature. Very much harkening back to that original. I think as much as I had fun with Predators as well, Laurent, I think you're right. Pretty much all of the sequels to this film kind of struggle to capture what was so special about that first one. And I think they get bogged down in mythology and lore and all that kind of stuff. And I think Prey very smartly sidesteps that and doesn't really care if you've seen a Predator movie. It's cool if you have, but Prey is just there to give you a good time. And I think they very much succeeded.
Absolutely. All right, so 2 pros. Charles Elmore, what did you think of Prey?
Yeah, I'm solidly the third pro in this consensus. Like I was greatly surprised. Like Laurent said, it shouldn't have been. Like maybe it's a sign of my age or the sign of my upbringing, but I'm always iffy on every new class of filmmakers until I feel like they've really gotten their footing and figured out kind of their voice and contribution in this medium. And so Trachtenberg's always been somebody that I've been hesitantly excited about, especially 10 Cloverfield Lane being such a great execution of both the Abrams verse without sort of the glut and dearth of the Abrams verse, while also still kind of putting something new in that. And of course, what better hands to kind of take on a property like the Predator series and inject it with this whole new aspect of a way of kind of telling that age-old story. Like, I think what's great about Prey is that it doesn't need to kind of remind you what the logic and the sort of mechanics of the Predator world is. Luckily, we've gotten to a point where we can agree on we all know the shorthand to a great extent, especially if we're fans of this genre, of what the Predator world is. And so they don't have to give you the 30-minute reminder. They don't have to tell you like, oh, all of this sort of prep setup about how they're changing it while also adding more muscles to it, as it were. And with Prey, they did such a great job of allowing a focus on a different type of story and different people and community and way of life, and how something like the Predator can be a really great metaphor and allegory to explore some historical stuff while still keeping it in consistency with the genre that made Predator itself such a like landmark sci-fi film. And, this thing that gets brought back to the well every 5 to 20 years, so long as, Disney or Fox or whoever owns it keeps ownership of the property. And Trachtenberg and his writers, and especially the Native and Indigenous community that they brought into being part of this story, they really made sure that, it wasn't just a bunch of cheap kills and a bunch of like, how do we kill a kid inside a car just to make it extreme and aggressive? Like every part of this film felt very thought out, both with how it's being couched in the universe and era of the story, while also like making sure the Predator fans feel satisfied, even though I guess there were some things that didn't satisfy them because, apparently only people who kill predators are men with big muscles. So
it's almost like they missed the point of the original movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, yeah. I think it's as close to a Predator movie as, Predator 2, like if it's just, let's just keep changing times and see how the humanity deals with this, like whether it's LA of the future or Nicaragua of the 80s or, fucking Kiowa Comanche world of pre-colonialism, I'm here for it as long as it's got the same ethos and not, how do we keep adding more for the sake of like, injecting more kills or whatever. So I'm a huge fan of it. I, of course, as a filmmaker, probably have a few technical complaints about it, but I won't divulge into that if you don't need to. So what did you think, Caleb? Were you able to catch it?
Yeah, I've watched it. I've watched it twice. I watched, firstly, they originally released it and it looked stunning. I noticed that, so I watched it the first time in English, as it was, released and marketed to me. And then I was like, man, maybe I'll get around to the Comanche version again later, just because it's really cool. So for listeners, not only is this film in English, they actually have a Comanche dub that they put a crazy amount of attention to detail in. And it's very, very impressive. Also, there were folks here in Oklahoma who helped consult on that piece. In fact, I think I heard that they recorded some of that here in Oklahoma. You can actually hear more about that in the interview I did with the producer, Jay Meyer, and then Sunrise Tippecone, who is a consultant on the film. But they didn't, just slap a few little native tropes on here and said, hey, look at the representation. They brought in the community and they said, we want to make sure we represent these people really well and authentically, while also kind of creating a really awesome Predator film. And here's the thing, I would say at the end of the day, this is probably my favorite since the original, mostly because I think it cuts to the core of what makes Predator so great. Dalton, you mentioned like it doesn't get bogged down in mythology, which is a plus. It's just a simple story. And the whole point of Predator is that these guys have this advanced weapons and they're all like bulked up, the best killers in the world, and they can't track this thing down because of their arrogance and ego, and they just think it's going to be an easy job. I mean, and the only time like Arnold only gets a leg up when he starts to think through things differently. So I actually thought it was a really great way to sort of bring that back to saying, hey, this Comanche woman who is already, she has something to prove both to herself and to her people in the film. The Predator is just the vehicle to help her, accomplish that. I thought that was really clever, calling back to the original. I also, again, going a layer deeper, this idea that loosely, this is me reading into it a little bit, the idea that the imperialist undertones here, because we do have, the French, I guess, poachers, fur trappers. They're out there. And interesting in the interview with Jane, she's like, yeah, there are multiple predators in the film. It's not just the aliens who are coming from a different planet, but also the people who are invading their land.
Well, there's that incredible little brief vignette we get, right, of the circle of life unfolding around the predator, right, as he kills the snake, kills the field mouse or whatever, and he kills the snake. Is constantly alluding to predation and power and all sorts of interesting stuff.
Yeah, and so I think just to sum it up, I love that there's a lot to read into if you want to, but also you don't have to. There's just a great, solid, well put together action movie from Dan Trachtenberg. I've been watching him ever since he made the little Portal YouTube video, what, a decade ago at least. And he obviously 10 Cloverfield Lane was excellent. I love The Boys series premiere, which he also directed, so I'm a big fan of him. Overall, just a tremendous film. Overall, I think it's a huge success. I wish it had been on the big screen, but alas, I'm still glad we got it nonetheless.
But if, big screen release, we don't get the Comanche dub.
Exactly.
And honestly, that's the way to watch the movie.
Yes.
I've also seen both versions, Caleb, and I think that there's something really special about that Comanche dub.
Originally Trachtenberg pitched the whole movie to just be in Comanche. There wasn't a dub, and they had to fight for all. It sounds like they had to fight quite a bit for all the authenticity. So the compromise was, okay, we'll release an English version, but then you got to give us the budget to do a really high quality dub. Tremendous film. So just really quickly, I mean, how would you say this? I've already kind of showed my cards. I think this is on par with the original. I don't know if it's going to be quite classic, iconic, because that film established the franchise, but I think this is every bit as good as the original. Dalton, how would you kind of stack this up against the other films?
I mean, it's easily the second best Predator movie, like by a wide margin. Is it as good as the original? Yeah, probably. Is it better than the original? I don't know. I haven't watched the original in a few years. I'd have to revisit. The original is one of my favorite 100 films, so I would have to go look. But I like Prey quite a bit, so I think it's it's very strong. definitely stacks up with the original. And I think you made a very good point of, the ways in which it both like embraces and inverts the ways it echoes the original, right? Like there's times where it directly alludes to it, but as you said, like Naru's motivations are different than Arnie's motivations. She's actively hunting. She's not just trying to survive. She wants to kill this thing.
Yes.
So it's kind of a different ball game, which I think just adds to the interest here for me. Yeah, I think this is, as you said, a tremendous film.
Awesome. Charles, how would you stack this up against the other Predator films?
I mean, I would stack it right up next to Predator. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of trying to say, is this a continuation of the bar that was set, especially when we're in this era of sort of continuing these long gap IPs and lores and extended universes, I guess, is how we're defining them now, multiverses, as it were. But I mean, it is an astonishing work of the storytelling basis, and it's way better executed than any of the other iterations. Like, I have a soft spot for Predator 2 because, opening that plastic clamshell every Friday because it was part of the VHS rental was just that spot for me. But it's as good as the original McTiernan version, and it's, I think, as equally important for how it sets the genre in a new space to sort of continue exploring that aspect of it, while also giving the kind of exposure that it's doing. Like, it's such a good film, and I really love what it's doing for more than just sci-fi genre fans of this movie. So it's up there, if not higher.
All right. LeBron, bring us home. How does it rank compared to the other Predator films?
What I love is it just doesn't waste any time. It's a very lean film, and there's something really refreshing about seeing a movie that knows what it is and leans into what it is and succeeds at what it's trying to do. And so, yes, I think it easily is stacked at least at second. And in some ways, and I have revisited Predator in preparation for Prey. In some ways it does surpass it, but that's just because of where we are now with technology, what we are with special effects and what have you. But as far as, I realize with Predator 2, when we're rewatching it, is like, it actually doesn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the mythology and what have you. And I was surprised how we just kind of go right into the jungle and the action just starts. And I think that's why this one works, is because it returns back to the basics kind of vibe to it. And with the introduction of the indigenous people, the indigenous storytelling, just adds another layer of urgency to it. I think that that maybe wasn't present in the original, but it's enjoyed in much of the same ways that the original was. So, but easily second place for it for that.
All right.
Yeah,
well said.
Just
go ahead.
Just, you can cut this out if you want to, but look, to piggyback on the Ron about the indigenous thing and the metaphor about what you were talking, Caleb. Predator itself was an allegory for Vietnam and America and the CIA's role within Vietnam, right? And everyone sort of unpacked how great McTiernan and the writers were at sort of couching all of that within this sci-fi. Just like we've talked about Prey, like, there is so much about just the messaging of colonialism, the resource genocide that happened with the arrival of Columbus and that era. And like you're talking about, Nauru is always surviving. This is a story about survival, just like the language, just like the people. And that itself is as much a metaphor as, Arnold being the capital US of A, saving, the rest of the world from, Vietnam and the threat of, communism. So that's what's really beautiful about it. And I think we've all kind of landed on the same page.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I know it's fun when we all agree. Sure, disagreements here and there can make for good radio, but also it's just great to celebrate that this is an amazing film, that it got made. Wish it was in theaters, but also the fact that it's even on Hulu with this sort of attention to detail is great. Just before we give letter grades real quick, was there anything else you guys wanted to add about Prey specifically?
I want to talk about Amber Midthunder. Who gives? I mean,
words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, Arnie gave one of the great action performances in '87, and I think Amber Midthunder is so compelling, so captivating as an action lead in this film. Just everything she does is great. She's totally dialed in, gets this character, and it's so great. And I think I'm impressed by Trachtenberg's savvy in pitching this film, because he came up with the idea of doing a film about a young Comanche woman who wants to be a hunter, and then came to the idea of, well, she should hunt the predator, right? Obviously. And I just think that's so cool that he very logically came to, being a kid who grew up on Predator, like many of us are, I said, well, I should just make a Predator movie and pitch that. And it's refreshing to see a talented young filmmaker go pitch a studio as opposed to a studio gobble up a promising young filmmaker. It's a different thing to me.
Yes.
I know it still ends up with a promising talent working on an IP feature, but at the same time, I think there's something a little bit more interesting going on. So again, I just very excited by Trachtenberg and Mid Thunder. Actually, the whole cast. Dakota Beavers, who plays her brother, is also like
he was
really
working
impressive.
at a TJ Maxx
Yeah.
before he got this job, by the way.
Yeah.
And I had like when I watched him, I'd never seen this
He's a
guy,
movie star.
but I was like, this guy's great.
He's a movie star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's ridiculously hot. Yeah, he's a movie star.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
this is a good movie.
Yeah.
but that was the only things that I could think of that I wanted to make sure we shouted out.
Yeah, I think to your point there, not only did Dan Trachtenberg pitch this movie and get it made, there was an entire Disney Fox acquisition that happened when this, in the development, because he's been working on this like 5+ years. So the fact that this movie didn't get killed in that acquisition still kind of blows my mind. On top of everything else, the fact that he was able to pitch it and commit to it and keep pushing for it, and even when the odds looked against the movie getting made, he kept pushing to have his vision realized. So great stuff. LaRon, anything else you want to add?
I was going to say it's been nice seeing the responses, minus a few gripes that a lot of my native friends watching the film have responded really positively to it, and seeing like that they had a strong female heroine that's not sidelined in favor of a serviceful A-list non-native actor, and it's just great to see that, yes, the movie can be made without a star that we know, and still be compelling and still have all those, and it just kind of takes away the myth that, when you invest in minority characters being the leads in your film, they can still be successful, So, yeah, it was great to see that.
Absolutely. It's a huge win for Native Indigenous representation for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Charles, bring us home here. Anything you want to add before we give out letter grades on the movie?
No, I think I agree with everyone's sentiments. And yeah, I think it's just a really great accomplishment. And yeah, I love all of it.
All right. Very cool. So let's assign letter grades. So for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, that's like you do in school. You get an A, a B, a C, a D. For some reason, we skip E. I still don't understand it. And you go straight to F for failure. So, and yes, pluses and minuses are allowed. So LaRon Chapman, I'll start with you. What letter grade would you give Prey?
I'd give this an A- for sure.
A minus?
A-.
All right. Dalton Stewart.
I go all the way up to A for this one. Yeah, it's missing that. I think it's the Comanche dub that puts it over for me.
Yeah.
I rewatched a second time, and it didn't hit quite as hard. Watching the Predator yeet a bear trap at a dude's head is really cool, but it does lose a little bit of the sparkle the second time around. But watching that Comanche dub, I think it really does add something special to this film, and it adds a texture to it that's kind of hard to beat. So yeah, it's a solid A for me.
Solid A minus. And Charles, how about you?
I'm going to give it an A-, purely because of all the praise. I have a few technical complaints that unfortunately I can't watch movies without also judging and critiquing the form and formalism of it. And there was just a few technical issues that I wasn't really keen on and how they did it and executed it. There was some sound dippings and, some choices on when to take sound away and bring sound in that I just felt were not necessarily reflective of the tone and the sort of nature of the story itself, especially when they took the sounds of nature away from a place where you would hear nothing but nature and not, weird ambient emotional synths, as it were. But then also, so there's some technical camera work that I just was sort of off put by. I feel like I'm noticing a trend in action cinematography where there's this sort of Wiccan born hybrid where we sort of whip around and catch all these sort of great accomplishments of throwing this and then kicking that and then slicing that. And we'll also talk about this in another movie down the road. But it's interesting they use this same technique in this movie and a movie we'll talk about down the road in this podcast, and how in the one we talk about they actually do a much better version. It's almost like the varsity class is getting to have their way at the equipment. And then in this case with Prey, there was a few sort of camera works where it felt like they either ended up too far into the action where it felt odd and awkward how they were blocking it, and then also too wide on scenes that felt like you needed to be more in space. And being on the technical side of filmmaking, I always wonder what the choices were, made at the time going into that and how they ultimately affect the edit and the final piece. And so I'm just, noticing those things. And so to me, there were a few sort of technical aspects that just knocked it down to a A-. But it does get the A because it is so exceptional in how it represents the Comanche culture, how it represents this moment that was so beautiful and earned and still needing to be happening, not just for the Native community, but for more communities like the Native and Indigenous community. But they finally get an opportunity to have the front row seat on these stories. And I think that's amazing. So it gets an A-, but it's a big capital A for me.
All right. Good deal.
I think you're so right to invoke John Wick, Charles. This is definitely a post-Wick action film, and it is absolutely like paying service to that franchise. I think it's showing that pretty boldly. I don't think it's hiding behind that at all.
No,
but it's interesting that it's how impactful that franchise has been on action cinema.
Oh, definitely. And there really is another podcast there, because just the way that action movies and action films have been filmed and evolved over since John Wick, frankly, has been interesting. And the reason I say that, Dalton, and I think you and I even talked about this in our episode for The Matrix, that movie is shot like a TV show, The Matrix Revelation, or not.
Oh my God.
Resurrections. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I gotta wonder, Charles, to your point, there are some
Did that
times.
come out this year, or was that last year?
It was last year, but we talked about it, and it's a conversation I've been having with a lot of filmmakers in particular, just like griping about how action movies are shot these days. Mm-hmm. I think John Wick, generally pretty good, but like there's a lot of other movies where you're like, why did they do it that way? Anyway, that's a separate podcast for another day. But anyway, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is definitely something there to consider.
Well, speaking of John Wick's lineage, we got another movie to talk about.
Yeah. I'm going to say, just to round us out, I'm also going to land on an A myself. So I'm not going to reiterate what everyone said here. I think it's great. Dalton, I think the Comanche dub and the attention to detail is also what puts it from an A- to an A for me. So highly recommend. Streaming now on Hulu. If you don't have Hulu, just subscribe for a month and watch it. It's like, what, $6, $8? Mm-hmm. Not very expensive. You know, it's the same as you'd pay to rent it.
Or
VOD.
steal it. Disney will be fine.
At this point, yeah. Why not? I have come around to piracy once again. Thank you, HBO Max and Warner Discovery. But yes, let's go ahead and move on.
Unless the Indigenous cast got points on the back end, in which case you should pay so that they can get in.
That's a very good point.
So.
Great.
You choose your own path. You're a human. You've got a moral compass.
See the movie first. If you can, throw some dollars their way. But yes. With all that said, though, yes, let's go ahead and move into another movie that is much more John Wickian in its nature, and that movie is Bullet Train.
Talk to me.
I am ready. You are getting the new and improved me. Because if you put peace out in the world, you get peace back.
I think you might be forgetting what you do for a living. Take the gun.
Every job I do, somebody dies. I'm not that guy anymore.
Some conflicts require a gun.
So according to IMDb, Bullet Train is described as 5 assassins aboard a fast-moving bullet train find out their missions have something in common. I'm just going to add one detail. That's a bullet train in Japan, IMDb. Gosh, they need to pay better writers for these IMDb synopses. I just got to say every time.
User-generated
I don't think
content.
they pay writers.
Right.
It's
Paid
always,
writers,
it's so hit or miss. I was feeling pretty good, and then we got Bullet Train. So Charles Elmore, I'm actually going to start with you on this. What did you think of Bullet Train?
Well, I'm fresh off the train. I saw it last night, and I really liked it. It was very enjoyable. It's probably about as good as it's going to be for the sort of iterative waterfall of this type of movie that the Wick kind of rainfall has created. I guess the director David Leitch was one of the co-directors of the original John Wick, right?
Yeah, he's not
and
credited.
And then they sort of broke off, and I've been a bigger fan of his earlier work, and this one is very good, but also it's very much seems like it's more of a display of an actor of a certain generation trying to find a bit of like their own John Wick. In this case, Brad Pitt very much seems like he's kind of wanting a bit of a, it feels like he kind of took a little bit of the therapy side of what he went through from like 2010 to 20 whatever during the divorce and controversy, and maybe just decided to turn all this kind of self-help, self-affirming meme culture we're living in and turn it into a John Wick action movie. And I really love it. I really like it because I'm a huge fan of Brad Pitt's very specific hand acting and grimace acting. And he's aging into such a wonderful concrete riddled face that I think this is a great role for him. I loved how sort of updated it was on a kind of Agatha Christie-esque kind of narrative, and I think Agatha Christie will come up in another conversation because it feels very similar to a film down the road that we'll talk about later. But this is very much like Murder on the Bullet Train Orient Express, but with the sort of Joe Carnahan Smoking Aces,
Yes.
John Wick style of storytelling. And that's the biggest film that I kept thinking about watching this was Smoking Aces, and how sort of just comic book graphic novel aggressive it is. And this feels like a live action manga version of like an Agatha Christie kind of storytelling. And I thought it was mostly successful, if not unfortunately too long. So that's my overall assessment.
So generally positive
for the moment.
Generally positive with a few quips here and there. I think that's fair. Dalton Stewart, I'll throw it to you.
I think it's very very shrewd of Charles to invoke sort of the Carnahan lineage here. Yeah, this reminded me a lot of Smoking Aces, and it appeals to the 16-year-old in me who saw Smoking Aces on opening weekend and then crashed his car talking about how cool Smoking Aces was. So at that level, this movie does appeal to me. I think it's a very slight film, unfortunately. It's okay. Mm-hmm. I think absolutely it is showing Brad Pitt's movie star chops. There we go. I'd say that 5 times fast. It showcases him as a performer, and I like what he's doing here. I think he's pretty funny in it, and the jokes land more often than not. I think the cast is all really solid. Brian Tyree Henry is great here. Yes. I love his whole Thomas the Tank Engine bit. I've never liked Aaron Taylor Johnson more, ever. Hiroyuki Sanada always showing up,
always wonderful,
just always a class act. Yeah, and that does kind of bring me to one of the things about this film that's a pretty big failure. We just spent a lot of time talking about Prey and lavishing praise upon it for its indigenous representation, and this film does unfortunately do the thing that most films made in America set in East Asia do, which is erase Asian faces pretty much entirely. And yeah, I mean, Hiroyuki Sanada and the actor who plays his son, whose name is escaping me at the moment. I've seen him in other stuff, though. They have some stuff to do. They have plots. They are central to the story, so I'm not going to totally sell the film short, but it's definitely doing a thing we've seen other films do, and it's pretty disappointing. But yeah, it's funny when it's supposed to be funny most of the time. I think the action looks okay, but it definitely does not have the look of some of Leach's other stuff. It doesn't have that visceral feel of Atomic Blonde or John Wick. Like, I don't think Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brad Pitt spent a lot of time doing jujitsu to prepare for this movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, the action looks okay, but it definitely leaves something to be desired. And as Charles said, it's far too long. Yes. This movie does not need to be 2 hours. But you know exactly what kind of movie it is when Michael Shannon shows up. And that's sort of when this film reveals to you what it's been doing all along. And yeah, you're either into it or you're not.
Yeah, I think that's well said. You're either into it or you're not.
I'm just an old man now. I've seen a lot of movies like this, and I'm a little too jaded to fall for something like this, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. So Laurent, the big question is, were you on board or not?
Yeah, did you buy a ticket?
Did I buy a ticket? I was late, but I made it just in time. No, I land somewhere between Charles and Dalton on this. I really like the cast. I like the characters. The dialogue is funny for the most part, and there's a few really nice action set pieces in here. Just a few for me. And all of that worked pretty well for me until about the last act. And I think that's probably what we're talking about here. Runtime here really does bog it down at some point. This needed to be a lean, 100. I'd say I'd go as far as 100 minutes.
Yeah, I could go 100.
105, but 2 hours we didn't need of this. And the last act for me just gets very disjointed and messy. Overall, again, I had a good time with this. If this was on TV at home and it was in the middle of it, I'd sit down and watch it again. It doesn't offend me in any way. But coming into it with slightly higher expectations, I did fall with needing, with a little wanting for sure after watching it. But
so I think I'm a little closer on the positive side. I wasn't. Now I'll put it this way: when I walked out of the theater, I was like, "It's all right."
Yeah.
My complaint about the time has remained. And funny you mentioned the last act. I actually think the second act is where I would have trimmed some of the fat because there was a lot of excessive like plot twists that easily could have been excised. Just get to the third act, big action set piece, in which we reveal, again, Michael Shannon shows up, and becomes a very clear what kind of movie you've been watching, sort of thing, which I loved. I am on board for the kind of movie I was watching. Maybe I think my expectations were a little higher, and I think I gave this a 3-star Letterboxd review.
Yeah.
Today I give it a 3.5. Like I've warmed around to it. Would absolutely rewatch.
Yeah.
This is if it's on TV or I just need something to turn on while I nap or something.
Yeah.
But I love that. Yes, the Joe Carnahan Smoking Aces was a big one. Snatch, going back to the Guy Ritchie mob heist movies was very reminiscent, and I loved all of that. I loved how the movie would stop and flash back and tell you this entire story of a character, only for you to catch up to them and they'd be in one scene and then get killed immediately. But their death ultimately being meaningful to the grand scheme of things. All that sort of like how it fits together in a puzzle box sort of way, I found really entertaining. But yeah, I think the biggest things for me though, runtime, and Dalton, to your point, I really just, the action wasn't as clean as I was expecting. When I think of like John Wick, I have a very high bar, and even like you said, Atomic Blonde. While I have problems with that movie, the action was certainly not one of them. Yeah. This felt way more like the Hobbs and Shaw, which is another David Leitch movie that I enjoyed, but this is the kind of studio blockbuster action I would expect to see in something like that. And there's a lot of times I also think the movie thinks it's being more clever specifically with how they're shooting things than they actually are. And it just, at the end of the day, gets kind of hard to follow for me personally. So I'm middle of the road, but generally positive, I would say. So I do, talking about, David Leitch, he's done a lot of different stuff since John Wick. I mentioned Hobbs and Shaw. We mentioned Atomic Blonde. He did Deadpool 2. Where would you guys sort of place this in his oeuvre? Like, do you think this is a very him movie that you'd recommend? Is it disposable? Because it feels like a little bit of a pet project in that it is not some giant IP. But I don't know. I just would love to get your take here. And Dalton, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I definitely think Atomic Blonde's a stronger film. I think it's jumping around time is done a lot more cleanly. Both films are kind of interested in structure manipulations, and I think Atomic Blonde does it a little bit more cleanly. And as we said, the action's just better. Charlize Theron's got an all-time good fight scene in that film. Nothing in this film is going to resonate with the words all-time good. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. I think it's about as good as Deadpool 2 probably, which I think is low-key better than Deadpool 1. Both of those are films I don't really love, but I think Deadpool 2 is low-key better than the first one. And this is about as good as that. It's funny when it's supposed to trying to be funny, like 60% of the time. And for a movie like this, like that's honestly all it needs. It doesn't have to hit every single time, Not every joke needs to land. Not every joke's gonna land. It's not a comedy, but when it's trying to be funny, it's usually succeeding. And I respect that enough to say it's, it bears mentioning with the things in his filmography that are well respected. I haven't seen Hobbs and Shaw, so I can't really compare it to that film, but as far as his other efforts, I'd say it's comparable. It's definitely not in the same league as John Wick. It's simply not the case. And that'd be a little too auteur theory of me to say Stahelski is definitely the better director compared to Leitch. But I think his filmography, despite being less varied, it's just John Wick movies for Stahelski, but those films are succeeding at an extremely high level. Yep. And as the action canon nerd that I am, I got to say, that is the franchise that holds up, and Leitch's work is got diminishing returns so far for me, unfortunately.
I would say, generally speaking, that's kind of where I'm at as well.
Yeah. I want to see him succeed. I really do.
But though I would say I would put this over Hobbs and Shaw for sure.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'd probably put it over Deadpool 2 as well. Having only seen that film one time, enjoyed it, but haven't thought about it much since. But I don't know. Maybe I think that's just a preference choice because this is again, like a Guy Ritchie style, like assassin movie versus a superhero film.
Yeah. Did you see what David Ehrlich said about it?
No.
He said it was like somebody put Guy Ritchie anime into Dolly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is pretty accurate.
mid-journey generators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, that's where we're at now with like, and like literally the form of cinema itself is
Totally.
literally like in it, like you listen to filmmakers like the Russo brothers talk about, Captain America's Civil War, and they're like, ew, it's our three flights of the Condor. And you're like, really? Is it? This is your like conspiracy theory, the government's in control of everything, like cynical 70s commentary on America? Like, I don't think so. This is a comic book movie. But I guess if you want to use a few shorthands that let us know, like, there's capital C cinema being put into this just fluffy artifice sort of derivative, like what otherwise like impermanent, whatever, like, and it's totally where we're at in media and film and cinema, and it's part of a lack of literacy, or sort
Yes.
of critiquing the literacy and knowing how to sort of detach it from its sort of prurientness or its intellectualism and still apply it to the things that we like and enjoy. Like, obviously literature, painting, all this stuff, even music has all suffered from this. And now cinema, being 150, 200 years old, is kind of at that stage. But this is a film that is sort of endemic of this part of film grammar. And the fact that the action looks very clunky, but also confusing and confounding. And we're still in this like whiplash of saying, like, Spielberg is a master of single take action and cinematography, and even haywire with what Soderbergh did with action there. We're still in this phase where it's like, there's these sort of like moments where you can tell where they're cutting frames to sort of let the old actor get that hand up to block the stunt actor that's already waiting for him to get the hand up. Mm-hmm. Like, I saw this in this Jamie Foxx vampire movie where like Jamie's arm goes up 2 frames too soon before the stunt guy gets his hand through. And
I know exactly what you're talking about, Charles. Yeah, I just watched Day Shift. Yeah.
Right. And is very much in that world where they're pulling from all this culture and pop culture and the fact that we can sort of 6 degrees of Kevin or Guy Ritchie this idea. It's just, unfortunately, I really loved it as the way I love any sort of just pop trash like this,
right?
In its purest, beautifulest form. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not going to go back to it. Or if it is on like, Hulu, and I happen to get home at 2 a.m. and I still I'm tired, I might put it on and it'll put me to sleep. But it's not like, a stellar entry of the form. I think I think you're right, Dalton, about Stahelski. Like, the volume versus the like material itself. Like, Leach has been out here just trying to figure out how to recapture the Wiccan style and the Wiccan lore. And I think when he hits it really well, like with Atomic Blonde, it's really, really good. And it's because it's anchored by an actress that's really committed to being in that same Wiccan kind of commitment that Keanu gave. Totally. Here, I feel like Brad Pitt's just sort of like, I don't want to do the work that I had to do on Fight Club or, even the earlier action stuff like Troy, but I'm also like still riding this high of looking like the sort of Ken doll, high school quarterback that still has his body and form, but doesn't, get on the horse as easy, but he still wants to stay relevant. It's a bit of a disappointment in that regard, because it's like, you could easily take 10 years off, age into like this perfect, like, Redfordian kind of role, like he kind of inherited when he aged into that role of his career. But I think that the industry is dictating all these sort of great actors to kind of keep flogging themselves to the culture to kind of stay relevant. That's my overall, unfortunate assessment of Leach.
You're not wrong, and I think John Wick's a great example of Keanu being forced to just continue to do crazy, insane action movies as an example, because that's the stuff that people show up to see. Yeah. As much as we love those movies, but to your point, he's doing that because he knows that's what people want to see and how he's gonna.
That's what we've always wanted to see, though, right? I mean, that like there's a Buster Keaton bent. To like John Wick 3 when he gets put through like 10 panes of glass in a row. That's comedy. That was just pure jokes.
The knife scene where they're literally fight. That was
the knife museum.
Hilarious
Comedy. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think that's well said, Charles. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Brad Pitt in a second, because I do think that's an important factor at play here. But Laurent, I did want to give you a word here. I mean, just in terms of how you would place this with against other David Leitch films. Like, what did you think?
Yeah, tonally, I feel like it's more aligned with Deadpool 2, and then it kind of leans into the ultra violence of Atomic Blonde, but it kind of opts more to present it in more of like this cartoonish kind of Quentin Tarantino-esque light, vibe to it. But for me, honestly, I think what it is in differentiating it from that is like the storytelling just kind of suffers here for me. It's just kind of basic, for me, and kind of in many ways formulaic. So the aesthetic is cool, but it kind of just loses steam the longer we sit with it as we're watching it, Like it doesn't exactly stick the landing. I mean, literally, the train doesn't stick the landing. Oh, that's a spoiler. Sorry. But so it's just...
Thanks, Laurent.
So sorry. I won't tell you who survives and who doesn't, but, it's Bullet Train. I mean, it's not going to end well, I mean, I just think it's not as sophisticated, as the other films, while still just having this like jovial, like kind of goofy charm about it that I found infectious and is what kept me on board. It's the reason why I didn't jump off the train. So,
Lauren, you said something that I thought was very interesting, and it just kind of speaks to like how postmodern American filmmaking has gotten. You mentioned this movie kind of feels formulaic, and it's interesting. Like in 1992, when Tarantino's jumping around chronologically in his crime movie, it's this big innovative move, and everybody's so excited. And you're right, like 30 years later, it's just like, okay, yeah, I got it. I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen an out of order movie before. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I don't know that it brings anything new to this genre in any way. I was really excited about the Japanese aesthetic, but Dalton, to your point, they kind of short shafted the cast and the characters there, and it just didn't quite feel like it was true to even like the anime and manga thing it seemed inspired by. So all that said, though, I want to circle back on Brad Pitt, because this film, I believe, is also also produced by Brad Pitt, correct? His studio did this. I just want to talk a little bit about, Charles, the state of Hollywood and movie stardom being a big part of this. Is Brad Pitt still a bankable star? Do bankable stars really still exist, honestly? Because this performance feels like he's starting to, like you said, settle into his, just tiptoe into my, I'm an old guy, but I'm still sexy and I can still do cool stuff, but not actually.
This is his first old man action movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do we think, is this a part of, A, do you think this is something people want to see from a Brad Pitt movie? And B, does that excite you? And Dalton, I'll start with you on that.
I am kind of surprised how not well this movie's doing. Yeah. I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a big hit, and maybe that's what it takes. Maybe you need DiCaprio and Pitt to open a movie, and that's where we're at. We don't have movie stars like we used to. We got
we got to do some addition.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's also a Tarantino movie, so it's like it's a triple threat. It's not just a one man stardom.
You have a lot of bankable brands, for lack of a better way to put it, going on. Whereas with the Chris's, they can't open a movie. It goes straight to Netflix. As we don't have movie stars like we used to. It's just a different business. Now, is Brad Pitt bankable? Yeah, people like to see Brad Pitt, but again, nobody can open a movie to $50 million on their name alone. I just don't think it can be done anymore.
Unless their name's Tom Cruise.
I was going to say Tom Cruise.
Tom,
one exception.
Mr. Movies. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, Tom Cruise and a property from literally 40 years of generational overlap of financial opportunity at a time when it was okay and permissible to really get out and go to the theater. Like,
that's a good point.
Top Gun Maverick, not to go too offshoot, is going to be like a chapter of its own in the book about saving the cinematic movie-going experience, specifically for what it did to kind of fool some studios while also enabling a lot of others to still commit to and believe that the theatrical experience can be maintained and still profitable and generate people to go out and get it. But
it never hurts to have
Bullet Train is not that example.
No.
No. Yeah, just one side note, because we didn't get to talk about Top Gun on this podcast, and I don't really want to belabor it, but the only thing I'd say there is I really, to your point, yes, Tom Cruise puts butts in seats with Mission Impossible, with Top Gun Maverick. But I honestly think though Top Gun Maverick was only as successful as it was because it came out this summer and a summer where there was nothing else like it. Had it come out its original release in 2020, there's no pandemic against everything else, I actually think it would have done okay, but it certainly wouldn't have been the runaway success story that it is today. I think that's my take.
It never hurts to have the full weight of the American war machine behind you either.
That's true.
You got Mr. Movies and the bomb droppers on your side. Yeah,
it's a fair point.
And Jesus Christ of cinema telling you he almost died for your sins just to go back to the theater.
He'll always
introduction
do it.
Up the top.
I forgot about that.
I can't wait. I can't wait for him to die on the set of
experience.
Dead Reckoning Part 2.
Oh, it's gonna be amazing. It's legendary.
It's the perfect closure to any career.
Dead Reckoning, in which he actually dies. You're right. The whole movie around the fact that he dies on the set.
Yeah. It's Brandon Lee times 1,000.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Laurent, your take on Brad Pitt? Any thoughts on him as a movie star? Can he be utilized well in this new chapter?
I feel like Brad Pitt. I'm loving this Pitt renaissance of sorts. He finally got his Oscar. Finally got his due. And I think he's in a place right now where it's like, okay, he's proven himself as a movie star. He's just having fun. That feels like it with this one. He's very relaxed into this. It's not that he's phoning it in per se, but he's definitely like just having a good time. He's not taking it all too seriously, and he has that natural kind of goofy charm about him. I've loved Brad Pitt since he took his shirt off in Thelma and Louise. So I mean, I've been on the Pitt train for a long time. But I feel like, I agree with Dalton's sentiment about, him not having being the big box office draw that he used to be. But I also think that it's indicative of the time that we're in with movies. Like we had a conversation before the podcast, about how hard it is to get butts in seats. People are opting, to go to streaming and stay home and not spend the money to go out to the theaters, for a whole host of reasons, for financial reasons, so they'll go to the movies to see like Avatar this later on this year, the big spectacles that really warrant seeing something in a theater. But like this is kind of like right there, in that like, yeah, it's a box office. I mean, it's an action spectacle, but not quite of the par of that kind of film, So yeah, I think it's a combination of factors, but I also do agree that that Brad Pitt may not be that star anymore. He's been around for so long. We respect him as an actor, but Bullet Train isn't necessarily the thing that's going to, bring in that large mass audience. So.
Yeah, I think to your point, Dalton, you mentioned DiCaprio a few minutes ago. I think Brad Pitt is well suited here as the anchor to an ensemble. Again, I think there's a lot of other factors that play into this movie not being a hit. I mean, it did okay by 2022 standards. They haven't called it a disaster, but it's doing just barely making ends meet, maybe. But I think this is a great ensemble cast, which is one of the things I like about the movie. And I actually think Brad Pitt's a great anchor, but in order for him to really be most successful, in my opinion, as both a performer, but also a box office draw, you've got to have other folks. And unfortunately, he is the biggest name. I think if you get a Leo or someone else of that caliber to he is a nice sort of, plus one. Oh, Brad Pitt's here too? Yes. But he's not the thing people are showing up to see. I am curious and excited to see him shift into older Brad Pitt part of his career, because I do think one of my favorite things about him is when he takes on the really weird kind of eccentric roles, and I think this chapter should enable him to do that without excuse, versus, feeling like he has to play an action star or, an Ocean's 11 riff for like 8 movies or something. But again, I'd love to see him deployed more effectively in a larger ensemble cast for the future. All right, Charles, anything, I know you mentioned Brad Pitt earlier. Is there anything else you want to say on the matter before we wrap up?
No, I do want to posit a theory. Do we think this is like a sort of subtle Soderbergh extended universe of the Ocean's Soderbergh universe? There are some people that pop up in this movie that either feel like they all got a package deal on like some travel certificates to go to some, tropical countries and shoot a bunch of movies together. Or they're this is, the Rusty taking another job, but changing his identity because, the heist business is too much stress for him, while also being handled by Danny Ocean's sister. And then maybe Magic Mike shows up somewhere along the way, maybe at a European vacation, exploring his, sensuality. Did anyone read into that at all, or was that just me?
I am now.
I kind of
want to go back and rewatch the entire filmography just to put this theory together. Yes.
There was a point where I just started filling that in and was like, this is the movie that makes it better.
I'm just obsessed with putting Channing Tatum,
Yes.
Sandra Bullock, and Brad Pitt in the same movie together. It's happened twice in 1 year. Like they're just a package deal now.
You know how that probably went
for it.
though. You know that went. I'm sure it's like calls up Sandra Bullock. One of the two calls the other. I'm not sure who did it first. Hey, Brad, can you cameo for shoot for a week? Yeah, I'm doing the thing, even though listeners can't see me doing the phone thing. But hey, I know. Can you do this? Be this one character in my movie for a week? And he's like, I don't know. Can you be a voice actor in my movie?
I love the idea of actors
and do
trading
one
cameos.
scene in front of a volume.
Yes,
That's the new green screen, by the way.
that scene actually looked really bad too. I have to say.
The final scene in Bullet Train. It's very poorly
it's
composited.
bad.
Yeah.
And I won't
That's
spoil
obviously
anything
a
further,
tack-on.
but I will say that there were a variety of cameos in this movie, and I did find those to be really, really fun. Even if they're a one-trick pony, they're not going to be as fun the second time, but that first time, it was a lot of fun to see them pop up. All right, letter grade for Bullet Train, Dalton Stewart. I'm starting for you.
This is like a C-, which sounds bad, but convert it into star grades, that's a 2.5. That half star, that's a pretty special half. That means you did something good. They did do Karen Fukuhara dirty, though, by putting her in this movie and giving her nothing to do. So, C-, 2.5 stars. It's fun. I'm with everybody here. I could see myself falling asleep to this in the future, but, it's, I'm not in any hurry to revisit it.
Yeah. Well said. Dalton, or sorry, LaRon?
I'm kind of toggling between C+ and B-, and I'm favoring a B- right now, just in this conversation that we're having, because I think it sets out to do mostly what it does, and it succeeds mostly at doing that, and maybe that's not very much, but for me, it was enough for maybe too long, but for 2 hours of entertainment. So,
all right. So that brings us to Charles. What letter grade would you give this film?
I also give it a pretty solid B-. It was exactly what I needed after a long, hard week of work. So it did exactly what it needed to do. It just needed to be about 30 minutes shorter and streamline some of those plot threads. Maybe we don't need to see Joburg as much. We got it the first time.
I will come back and round us out with the C+. And you raise a great point there, Charles. A lot of times these ratings are, it's circumstantial. What mood was I in when I went to theater? I'm not gonna lie. I saw this movie coming off of an extraordinarily difficult week in my life, and I literally was holding on to, I can't wait until we can finally just sit down in a theater and watch Bullet Train. And I, in fact, did escape for a couple of hours, and it was great. So, that's where it went from a C to a C+ for me. So. Okay. All right. Well, with that said, let's move on to our third film today, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies.
You don't have to be nervous. I'm not nervous. Wow, they're so impressive. You're impressive. They're gonna be obsessed with you. They're not as nihilistic as they look on the internet. You guys, this is me.
Oh, whoa.
This is your first relationship? Oh, no. You just kind of give that vibe. Well, you know that has weed in it, right? Silence! Who wants to play Bodies, Bodies, Bodies?
So how do you play?
So according to IMDb, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is described as when a group of rich 20-somethings plan a hurricane party at a remote family mansion, a party game turns deadly in the fresh and funny look at backstabbing, fake friends, and one party gone very, very wrong. I should note this film was released exclusively in theaters, firstly limited on August 5th, and then it expanded more widely on August 12th. That is when we got it here in Oklahoma on the 12th. LaRon, I'm going to start with you. What did you think of Bodies, Bodies, Bodies?
I feel like I'm super biased here because honestly, I love this, and it's because it's right up my alley in that kind of meta slasher satire vibe. If you guys know, I'm a Scream fanatic, so I think it's hilarious. I think it's subversive. I think it was unexpectedly clever. And while it doesn't reach the kind of heights of the best of the series of the Scream franchise, I feel like it taps into that same kind of energy while being its own unique animal. And so I feel like it's a new generation iteration of that kind of film with a very different approach. So.
All right, so you're saying you're gonna.
I'm pretty high on this.
Modern Scream, like Scream of the.
It's a stretch too far, but
Okay.
it's right there. It's
Okay.
like it's tapping into that vibe. So
Okay, all right. Dalton Stewart, what did you think of Bodies?
Yeah, I'm into this. This is a good movie. There's a very much a theater energy to this, and it comes from Helena Rajan, who directed this. Very much encouraged her cast to play off of each other in sort of a much more theater acting style, and I think it shows. I think the performances are all really, really solid here. I think there's some really kind of interesting things done with lighting throughout the film. As we lose power in the mansion and it gets a little spookier. We do some kind of clever things with glow bracelets and cell phone flashlights and sleep masks. I'm into this movie. This is a fun time, and it's got Oklahoma's very own Lee Pace.
Thank you, Lee Pace. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
I love Lee Pace. This is gonna be the whole review is just gonna be crushing on Lee Pace.
Yeah,
by
God
the way.
Emperor of the universe himself. Right? Is that what they call him in Foundation? No, God Emperor's Dune. My bad.
What is it? There's the three. I don't know.
Brother
yeah.
Day.
Brother Day. That's
what it
it.
is.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Anyway, we got it. Caleb and I know our Foundation.
That's right. Apple TV. Watch it, just so I can keep watching it. That's all I need.
Yeah. No, I'm into this movie. This is a fun time. I'm maybe a little cooler on it than Laurent, but not by much. I think that this is a fun time, and that's mostly. It kind of harkens back to a complaint some of us had with Bullet Train. I think there's some blocking and action in this that's a little clunky. Is a little early directorial debut type stuff. But nothing terrible, nothing that's really to make me mad or make me turn against the film. Overall, I'm very on board with this. I think every performance really works. I think it's very funny. I'm friends with somebody who's a nemesis of Rachel Sennett, or who's Rachel Sennett is a nemesis of them. I won't speak any further, but that was just very fun to have going into that movie. Is to think, hey, this actor is mean to a friend of mine.
Oh no!
Oh gosh, that's hilarious.
She's like my favorite part of this. That's
no, she's great in it. Yeah, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
She's absolutely fabulous. She is. It made me really want to see Shiva Baby, which I've been meaning to catch up with.
Fantastic.
That's what I hear.
Different podcast, but fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard
and
it's
it's only
very good.
70 minutes, so it's like a quick watch. So
Well, as for what I've heard, it needs to only be 70 minutes. I've heard it's a very stressful 70 minutes.
Yeah.
I've heard that as well.
And this is a pretty stressful, 90 minutes. I think this movie does a good job of making the stakes feel real, really ratcheting tension up. All the things you want from a whodunit. I think this film delivers.
Yeah. All right. So another very positive take here. Charles Elmore, what did you think of Bodies?
I think I'm probably going to land a little bit further behind Dalton and Laurent. I enjoyed it. First and foremost, positive praise up front. I really overall loved it. Is this kind of our generation's The Big Chill, maybe? I don't know. There's certainly a missing person that kicks off the whole movie, and everyone sort of gathers at a house to kind of unpack their sort of generational malaise and anxieties about where they've arrived at a certain age, and both how they saw themselves, but also how they sort of present themselves outwardly to their own generation and world. Feels a little Big Chill-esque, I guess, with a better soundtrack, thanks to Charlie XCX. But overall, it just felt like a lot like the generation it's kind of making a commentary on, I guess. It sort of meanders and loses track of the argument it's making, and ends up just sort of going back to a little quiet space or safe space to sort of regroup and then ultimately leave. That's kind of how I felt overall about the film itself, like as a just assessment of the movie form and all. That being said, I loved every single actor in this. Like Pete Davidson, sorry everyone, but I love that guy. Like he can, and maybe it's just a sort of hate love, but I will watch anything he's in because I just love what he does and the choices he makes. And he's exceptional in this, and he totally leans into the Pete Davidson-ness of his character. And he's a great foil against the what is primarily a mainly female cast, which I think is beautiful and so phenomenal about this movie. Like the opportunity to explore not just sort of class dynamics and economic dynamics within certain sort of aspirational circles, but also like what happens to women and BIPOC people and members of that specific class of people. Like this, they're all very phenomenal in embodying those sort of anxieties and arguments and reflections. And ultimately, I think I like that the most about the movie is what it's trying to say more about an aspirational class of the generation it's trying to make a commentary on in this beautiful kind of, again, Agatha Christie kind of inspired story, but with this new generational spin. But it just felt like they kind of, like you said, lost some sort of technical command of what the story they were trying to tell. And it's interesting, the three movies we're talking about are essentially, they all have access to the same mechanisms, but the financial aspect of that reflects how they have to make the movie. And ultimately, if you only have one stunt coordinator and two grips, you can basically only light with a sleep mask and a bunch of LED glow lights you get from the dollar store, right? But nonetheless, it's still very effective for what they did, and for it being an A24 film, like, it's right in line with that style. So, I'm a very sort of middle of the road about it, because I think I'm still trying to assess what it's sort of overall. It is the most densest of these three to kind of try to figure out what its whole meaning is. So that's why I'm still very cool on it. But that's where I landed on it, Caleb. What about you?
Yeah, I would say I'm middle of the road too, with a bend towards the positive, because it's unlike Bullet Train, where I think I came around to it more the more I thought about it. This one, the things that bothered me, the technical aspects, some of the character, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a couple of character interactions that they bring up in the last act of the film that I'm like, oh, this is super clearly very important, that I would have liked to have seen a little more setup in those same characters earlier in the film. The technical, I will say, the editing, and just, again, how they did some blocking and lighting, and specifically, I would say probably like the tail end of the second and beginning of the third act, I did get a little disoriented, and maybe that was the point. But I love the cast. I love Lee Pace. I love Pete Davidson. By the way, best sequel ever, Borat 3. I love how they really subverted the expectations and called it Bodies. But I say that to say, Marie Baklava, just love seeing her pop up in more projects. I think she's excellent. And her character was definitely the one I was most intrigued by, because she had so much going on internally that you were trying to figure out.
She's such a good audience insert, man. I mean, Bakalova is so good in this, and as one of the only explicitly not rich people, or not at least not middle, like the most working class person there, brings so much as like this very internal character. Yeah, I'm so glad you highlighted her.
She's
Caleb.
a great conduit for you, for the audience.
Yes,
totally.
Well, and she's a great conduit for the audience, but the way the choices they make at the very beginning of the movie and how they introduce these characters, I genuinely think with the whodunit, I was like, it could be anyone, even the main character we're following. I'm like, there seems to be motivation at play.
That's interesting. I always was pretty certain she had nothing to do with it. I was pretty sure she was clean of any wrongdoing. But that's interesting. That
was my take, because we open with a very romantic scene between her and her partner, but as they bring up, we're like, we don't really know anything about you.
Is it romantic, Caleb? I love you. It's okay if you don't love me back, but I love you. It's fucking great. I think I don't know. I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm starting to like it more as we're talking about it.
But to your point, though, I mean, Charles laid it out. This is a very the densest of the three movies, and I think it has been the one I've thought the most about in terms of like, how do I feel about this? What works? What doesn't? It's clearly saying something about Gen Z to a certain degree, and how Gen Z, or you could even extend to millennials to a certain degree, communicate via technology, text messages, and like the role that plays, and how sort of but it also kind of hits that deeper truth of like, we just all the times make assumptions about people. All of this entire scenario could have been avoided if these people just actually talk to each other, in a meaningful way.
And that's not necessarily a Gen Z thing, right?
No,
exactly. This is a movie about.
That's the point. But we'll get to that in a moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of commenting on Gen Z cell phones, and here's
comment on all of us.
But it's also but we are also the problems they have are the same we all have, and the way they kind of put that on the screen, I found pretty compelling. And I think I was really satisfied with the reveal at the end. I loved it. And again, I won't go into details of what it was, but I thought this is fresh, this is great, and it makes so much sense.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love the ending of this movie. I think this is an all-time great ending.
I tend to agree on that thing. So with all that said, maybe we could kind of put our finger on it. It's, Charles and I have said it's the densest film. Is there anything else in particular that you think sets this film apart from other movies we've seen this summer? Laron?
Well, I feel like, it's like, for me, it kind of is it's a standout, because it does feel like this fierce critique of the Gen Z youth culture, and privilege too. Like because these are all with exception of Maria Baklova's character, she's the one that doesn't have a lot of money. But I felt like what's fascinating about this is that I didn't warmly embrace any of these characters. In fact, I kind of despised all of them, but in deliberate ways. I felt like that was intentional.
Except for Lee Pace, he just wanted to lay and meditate. That's how can I hate a guy who does that?
That's fair, yeah. But what's fascinating about it is it does feel like a social commentary because you mentioned, like if they just had a couple conversations, this whole scenario could have been avoided. And I love that feels to be the point of the story is like as soon as they're not beholden to their cell phones, they're like helpless in regard and help and being able to interact and have human connections with people because they live in this other realm that Gen Z culture grew up in that so that's how they communicate. And so then all of a sudden they feel exposed and all their anxieties and all their insecurities are just kind of like being thrust out and that's how they turn really mean-spirited and nasty really quickly because they haven't dealt with their own traumas. And so I found all that to be really fascinating. I don't think they were meant to be embraced warmly. I think they were meant to be kind of examined and studied and like, hey, here's just a little peek into it. And I found that very hilarious. And one of the funniest lines involving Lee Pace is when they asked, is Rachel, say her name is Sennett's character, like, how well do you know this dude? And she's like, and then when we finally coax out that she's only known him for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
She's like, but he's a Virgo. That means something.
Dude, it's one of the jokes of the movie.
Yeah.
It's not even, she's like, he's a Libra moon or something.
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Something like super specific too. Yeah, it's like really like.
And that is literally something someone from that generation would say and mean it. So. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's an incredible joke.
Yeah. Dalton, what do you think?
I'm with Laurent. Yeah, I think everybody in this movie is like so compelling and kind of lovable in the ways that they're terrible.
Yeah,
like they're all very human and very real in ways that I appreciate. And as Charles mentioned, we've got Pete Davidson here who looks like he fucks, and that is the vibe that he puts out there. That is simply what he brings to the party, and he's great in this.
I mean, he got Ariana Grande and Kim Kardashian, so I guess he did something
and Kate
right.
Beckinsale. It's ridiculous, unfathomable. Anyway, neither here nor there. I think the character portraits we get here are really special and do add a lot to the film.
Yeah.
And it just makes that whodunit element more compelling. And again, where we end up makes everything that comes before that much more interesting to me, because it is as we've said, like it becomes so clear how avoidable this situation was. But fear is a very motivating emotion, and it definitely is something that's motivating everybody here. And again, that motivates people to lash out and like refuse to accept connection in really kind of interesting ways. And again, like
fear plus a little bit of cocaine goes a long way.
Well, yeah, look, being coked up certainly doesn't help. That's for sure. But yeah, I think the ways in which it like uses, this sort of generational stuff to make larger points about people. Like we do get a little bit of that generational conflict stuff. Lee Pace kind of realizing, oh, you're fucking with me. Like that moment's really great. Like this sort of revelation of oh, I am
this mockery or
exactly. I'm the subject of scorn and derision right now. I thought that I was one of the fun ones too. I think all that stuff's kind of interesting. But again, that generational stuff like gives way to larger like human concerns, right? And I think the ways in which this kind of shows generational differences to not be that real, I think is kind of interesting. And again, it is like being centered as like the Gen Z movie that's going on right now. But again, I think it's, I don't know. I think its concerns are much more broad than that. I don't think they're using specificities to get at something much more general.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles, I mean, what do you think? I mean, what sets us apart from other films that we've seen so far this summer?
I mean, I think to continue on Dalton and Laurent's point, like what sets it apart is that it is a film that is taking the sort of genre, this kind of whodunit murder mystery, in a house kind of, it's Clue hopped up on Adderall and, cocaine and San Pellegrino. And it's very fascinating to take the backdrop of a sort of generation who's grown up in a sort of high functioning, high performing post traumatic conflict era where we sort of try to resolve conflict before it even became a thing where we had to have conflict resolution methods and conversations. And so much of this film is about avoidance of conflict resolution through sort of confrontation and accountability. And everybody keeps talking about how they're concerned or they're checking in on, or they actually secretly hate or have, all these sort of things. And we all know having conversations or seeing shade on Instagram and Twitter or whatever social media view we're sort of parsing our generational voice through, have had those conversations as well, but have never had the like, hey, you're being a dick conversation, or,
Right.
Stop trying so hard to be ambitious, because some of us are just barely getting by with no ambition and it's hard. And keeping up with the sort of frame of performative like lifestyle is exhausting. And this film does a very interesting job sort of parsing those little nuances of human behavior and sociology and inter-class dynamics within that, within the sort of murder mystery, like horrific backdrop and that A24 kind of new line cinema of our Gen Z era kind of tone and style. So that's why I think it's still worth kind of looking at and going back and seeing like, how are these like reflections of the culture that it's made in, while also sort of commenting or just being the genre it is, which makes it very worth kind of unpacking, even if the filmmakers, didn't have the full capacity to execute it the way that Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven do, or, any of the sort of genres that sort of set the bar. But I'm very much interested in this, and I think it really sets itself out and worth really looking into and watching again after it's on VOD or whatever screen we're looking at.
And I think the thing that you mentioned earlier, Charles, I mean, I don't have much more to add because you guys have all said it really well, just sort of unpacking sort of, the difference between the specificity of Gen Z versus the larger human condition and the classic whodunits. But Charles, you mentioned earlier, this has a very strong Agatha Christie vibe. Agatha Christie's been around for a hot minute, right? So like this is still, despite being, I think, really innovative and timely, and introspective of both, living in 2022, both as, a Gen Z or not, this the framework is a classic framework that works extremely well for us to really explore where are we at today as humans. The fact that who are we going to throw under the bus when things fall apart? One of us is a killer. What's that going to look like? The finger pointing. What does that really reveal about us today versus when Agatha Christie originally rolled out her novels? But anyway, I said to say I love that we're able to continue telling new iterations on a story that's been around for a very long time. It just speaks to how powerful that genre has been. The last thing I'd say, guys, I mean, I felt a little attacked in this, I'm a little attacked that podcasters just not getting great screen representation. The trope continues. The podcasters are really dumb and full of themselves, or they're really predatory and are taking advantage of people. So
I secretly love this podcast, so I wouldn't tell you.
Dalton, I have a confession. I've never listened to your podcast. That's
I'm always happy when I find out people haven't listened to my podcast, honestly. I'd rather they didn't.
That's not true. All right, well, great. There's really a lot more we can unpack here. Just real quick, is there anything else we want to add about bodies before we do letter grades and move into our round robin iteration?
No, I think I'm happy.
Good. All right. Dalton Stewart, what letter grade would you give bodies?
This is a B+ for me. Some things hold me back from going a little higher, and maybe on rewatches I'll figure out what it is. But I do like this movie quite a bit, and I look forward to revisiting it at some point. I think it pairs really well with, Charles already mentioned its A24 pedigree, and I think it pairs really well with Spring Breakers. 10 years out from sort of the birth of A24, they've continued to be a force for cinema in America and, for real movie making. And, if you've listened to my recent top 100 films countdown, I am sort of an A24 stan at heart, but I think it's because they keep making films that are about something. And for whatever quibbles I may have with bodies, and I'm sure other folks might have more quibbles, like whatever doesn't work about this film, I think what you can't say works is that it's about real people and real emotions.
Yep.
And that's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Charles, what letter grade would you give bodies?
I would give it a solid B. I mean, I think just knowing how a film like that, just being able to go to a theater and see, is such a success, and the road that they probably had to go down to be able to get financing and that cast together, and how long they probably took it. And I'm sure there are articles talking about how they all met in college and just talked about this idea and finally got access. And I think that is such an applaud worthy accomplishment. And I think knowing that, and the fact that they had to sort of probably compromise certain aspects of their ambition and their vision, like the fact that this still turned out this way and we're talking so deeply about it, I think it's a really solid debut and success. And I am really interested to see if this is successful, what it does for the filmmakers and the writer of this, and how, if they, as they mature into more bigger budgets and more sort of control over their own projects, kind of what they can do, the same way that Robert Eggers got his opportunities, and filmmakers of his class have been given. And so I'm very proud of this as a movie going experience, and that's why I think a B is where I land, and it probably will go a little higher if I get to watch it a few more times.
Yeah. Well said. LaRon?
I think they really took some risks here that I think, like, we've all been kind of warmly embraced the ending. We've all said that we really love it. But the mixed company that I saw it with were very split on that. They felt like it was a huge waste of their time once we got there. But for me, I got a good laugh out of that, and it made complete sense. It made the entire movie like click for me. But I think it's really sharp satire, and again, right in my wheelhouse. This is these are my Marvel movies. You know what I mean? Like the horror genre, that element. Like, I will defend a B movie to the end of time.
LaRon's Avengers, if you take all the killers from every whodunit in the last 10 years, that's his Avengers.
There you go. There it is.
I'd watch that.
So I think that they took some bold risks storytelling wise, and I think that what suffered in some of the other films that we've mentioned earlier in the podcast were the storytell details, and I think that's what shines in this particular movie, and the technicals kind of suffer. But for me, it's really sharp satire, a really fun watch, really insightful about today's youth culture. So I would give this probably a solid A-.
A-? All right, LaRon, come in real hot on that. I love it. I'm gonna go with the B. B for bodies, just straight down the middle. Also, it could have been a B+ if there was Lee Pace was not in every single scene. That was the problem.
That would have notched it up.
I went from a plus to a regular, but I'm a sucker. Also, halt and catch fire. This is a shameless plug on Netflix. Tremendously incredible show. Underrated. Watch it. It's great. But I think this is going to be, Charles, I'm really close on line with you here. I do think I'm going to warm up to this the more I watch it. But for now, have a few hangups. The fact that it felt long. It's a 90-minute movie, and that was actually one of the selling points. I'm like, oh, it's 90 minutes. Me and my fiance Lauren can get in, get out, have a good time. We love whodunits. And it actually felt really long, which was weird.
It's a dense 90 minutes.
It's a dense 90 minutes, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but it's keeping me from saying, like, yes, this was the time, what I was expecting at the end of the day. But still, very solid B, great movie. I'm going to recommend it to pretty much anyone I talk to who has any passing interest in horror or whodunits or mysteries, for sure. All right, gentlemen, we have reached sort of the conclusion section of our podcast, and the challenge here is we are going to do a round robin where each one of us gets a minute to talk about another movie we've seen this month. Full disclosure, I'm a little, you guys are really here to lift me up because I have actually not seen a ton of movies this month. However, I have one. So I will be doing one round. We're going to go around the table, starting with LaRon, then Dalton, and then Charles, and then me. And then I'm going to mix it up after that until we run out of movies. And once you're out of movies, just say, when I pass it to you, say, I'm out of movies. And I'm going to be timing all of you. So 1 minute flat. We all set to go? All right. So round robin, starting with LaRon. Go.
The first movie I want to give a shout out to here is Emily the Criminal with Aubrey Plaza, who's known for her acidic brand of comedy, but, kind of gets overlooked for her dramatic chops, and here proves that she has the range to deal with that in a film that is a great commentary on class and wealth disparity. There's not an ounce of, of her signature brand of comedy in this. This is definitely a vanity-free Plaza role, and I hope people put a spotlight on her for future projects like this.
Oh, great. 30 seconds. Dalton, go.
I just checked out Gerard Carmichael's directorial debut on The Count of Three, which, as with Prey, is now on Hulu. Got very limited theatrical release, so I'm glad it's widely available now. But a really great film that he also co-stars in with Christopher Abbott. A movie that manages to say life is for living without ever being like saccharine or sentimental about it, because it's very, a very earnest and heartfelt exploration of what it feels like to want to die. And how to survive when that's seems like the furthest thing from your mind. It's a really great film. Again, a really wonderful directorial debut. Funny and moving. I really liked it a lot.
Great. Wow. 45 seconds. Charles, go.
Has it got to be new or old? I missed that part.
This month, August.
Yeah,
this
go
month?
for an old one.
Go for old one. Yeah.
Well, I only say because I bought it this month at the Barnes & Noble, but it was The Devil in the Blue Dress. But if it's a new one, it's definitely First Shift, which is that Jamie Foxx vampire movie that's on Netflix right now. It's essentially Dawn in 60 Seconds, but with vampire teeth instead of cars. And it's just basically Jamie Foxx plays a blue-collar dad trying to keep his broken family somewhat intact, feeling like they're middle class. And so in order to do that, he has to accrue a certain amount of money before the bills come due. And in order to make money, he has to essentially hunt down vampires in the San Fernando Valley and extract their teeth in hopes of profiting from it. And there's a whole wonderful backstory of land development and bougie neighborhood developments that is rife with metaphors. But it's a really entertaining film, and it's again continuing this kind of action trend we're in. But Jamie Foxx is so just wonderful to watch, and every time I see him, I just can't not look away. And so he really elevates a B kind of material into something really entertaining. So First Shift.
You nailed it. 1 minute.
Day
1 minute
shift,
on.
whatever.
God, yeah. All right. My one other movie this month is 3,000 Years of Longing. I just saw this last night, and it's the new movie from George Miller. You know, George Miller, the one who directed Happy Feet, Babe Pig in the City, and of course, Mad Max Fury Road, naturally, in that order. No, not really. First, this is great. This is really a largely sort of a chamber piece in which it's mostly the core plot is actually just people sitting in rooms talking, so you have Tilda Swinton who basically, through means that you'll discover via watching the movie, finds a genie who is played, or a djinn, I should say, that's played by Idris Elba. And they just talk about Idris Elba's story, what brought him to where he's at. I found it to be a very powerful story about stories, about loving, about love, about loss, and sort of that longing feeling you have for love through various chapters of your life and how that sort of evolves. Again, I love that we are going to get another Mad Max film from Miller. Fingers crossed. I think it's in production right now. It was nice to see him do something a little more quiet and introspective with this piece. And now I'm going to go to you, Dalton.
Oh, you're coming back to me already. Well, I've seen everybody's mentioned the films I've seen, so I'll say let's talk about Emily the Criminal first. I also saw this film. Aubrey Plaza's throwing heat in this. Holy shit, she's so good. And Theo Rossi, an actor that I like quite a bit, he's showed up in a few things. He's kind of most notably supporting character in Sons of Anarchy, but I think he's really, really good and understated in Emily the Criminal. And again, I want to just echo everything LaRon said. I think it's a very thoughtful exploration of modern times. I have a spouse with a shitload of student loan debt, so it's a very relatable film, and hard not to relate to and feel drawn to this story of broken financial systems and broken promises. It's a really solid movie.
So again, the name of the film one more time.
Emily the Criminal.
Emily the Criminal. Underline that one because you got 2 recommends there. LaRon, go.
The next one I want to highlight is Resurrection. I don't think we really embrace Rebecca Hall as an actress well enough. I think she's been doing great work consistently for the last 10 years. This is an original genre thriller, that takes some really ambitious narrative swings into the surreal and kind of metaphorical, and it's really anchored by her performance. Because I don't think anyone would take this really bonkers, like it goes to some crazy places in its final act, without her performance grounding it, and it's a killer of a performance. So.
All right. Resurrection. Check it out. Charles, back to you.
I'm out because I don't get to watch as many movies anymore.
I feel that. Dalton, back to you.
Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, another A24 joint with Jenny Slate and, I can't think of the director's name, but he's also the co-lead. What a nice little movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Shell movie made me cry. Whatever. Mm-hmm. I liked it a lot. It's cute, very heartwarming. If you saw these internet videos, 10 years ago or so when they were first circulating, I think you'll get a kick out of this. But even if you're not familiar with the source material, I do think it's just a really strong hybrid stop motion animation live action film. It's weird when A24 makes a family movie, but they definitely did. And I think this works really well as just sort of a low key family story that you could take literally anybody to. You could take your grandma to this, you could take a kiddo to this. This I think would work on just about anyone. It's such a charming film.
Man, you got to get those kids in the A24 train early. Laurent, back to you.
I'm gonna bring us home with another Idris Elba film, Beast, which released this.
How is Beast?
Listen, I went into this with very tempered expectations, and you know what? It's a B movie through and through. It's your Deep Blue Sea Anaconda, but not quite of the height of that. But still, he punches a lion in the mouth. That is cinematic history in its own right. So it's really, really tense. Again, 90-minute movie doesn't waste any time. Gets right into it, and it works as what it is. It's completely disposable, but it's a good time.
All right, great. Dalton, anything else on your end?
I also saw Day Shift. Also think it's dumb as hell. Also think it's kind of fun. I also saw 3,000 Years of Longing. It also made me feel feelings of longing and love. I think it's a great film. I also watched for the first time Stanley Kubrick's The Killing this month. Ooh, nice. It's a good noir. And I revisited the film 20th Century Women. What a film. What a picture.
Amazing movie.
Holy shit, what a movie. Yeah. I had forgotten how much I love that film. And I think that pretty much rounds me out. I had a very busy August. I've been watching a lot of stuff.
Very nice. All right, cool. Great job, guys. Well done, team. Thanks for everyone for pitching in here. I was distracted by dragons for some TV show that I'll talk about in a little bit at the end of the show that occupied a lot of my brain space the last 2 weeks. But lots of good movies. And frankly, upside of September kind of being awful is I can catch up on all the stuff you guys just mentioned that I didn't get to. There we go.
And avoid the rest.
Avoid the rest. All right. Well, we are going to wrap up the show just by talking about what movie we're most excited to see through the remainder of the year. Or a couple movies. It doesn't have to be one. You could pick one or two or three, whatever comes to the top of mind. So we have what's that? 4 months left in 2022, and I'm curious about how it's going to play out, given that basically September and half of October is total nothing. So, Charles, I'll start with you. What are some of the movies that you're most anticipating this year?
I think I'm in the same group as everyone, expecting kind of the big ones like the Fablemans and kind of Spielberg finally being at the age where he can kind of really explore his origins and put it in the cinematic record. But I saw the poster and the trailer, and I don't know if it's just the AI targeting me specifically, but the Tar movie that Cate Blanchett is going to star in, this new Todd Field film, that looks amazing. And like when I saw that, I just was immediately like, there's nothing I'm more looking forward to than kind of watching that just by the trailer. So I love Todd Field. I love Little Children, and I love In the Bedroom. And he's one of those filmmakers where you're always surprised why there's such a gap between their output. But then when you see the film they finally come out with, you're kind of really proud and astonished. And, it's not surprising that, Todd Field was in a Kubrick movie and sees Kubrick as kind of a mentor of his and takes the kind of time to explore historical figures like this, like the subject in this movie. So it seems like a real interesting kind of caliber movie that I'm very excited about. That definitely goes on my radar.
All right. Yeah. Tar. And I also just saw the trailer for that this week. I guess it was released, but I'm very intrigued to say the least. I had no idea this movie even existed. So it moved up the chart pretty fast. Laurent, how about you? What are you most anticipating for the remainder of the year?
The Tar is definitely one of them. I feel like I had a conversation with my partner about it, and we were like, I was like, how is Cate Blanchett and this filmmaker never worked together? But then I went and looked at his filmography, and I was realizing, because he hasn't made very many movies. They just have so much weight, his movies, that I feel like that he's been been
Has
doing
he done anything since Little Children?
I don't think so.
That was his last movie, right? He's done anything.
I don't think so.
Yeah. What a movie though.
It's like that in the Bedroom. It was a huge movie when it came out. And Sissy Spacek doesn't get enough praise or enough flowers for that performance in that movie. But I mean, obviously Halle Berry won the Oscar that year, so that took historical significance, for sure. But as far as outside of that, for me, I mean, I'm going to go back to the genre films and say that, I'm excited for Halloween Ends, and Halloween Kills cannot kill my joy. Okay, guys. So
it tried really hard.
It tried really, really hard to do so, and I can't really defend it very, 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 very
Evil
much.
dies tonight, Laurent.
But look, I've been following Laurie Strode not for 40 years. I'm not quite that age, but I've watched all the films, and I'm. This, in many ways, again, seeing Jamie Lee Curtis saying this is the last movie she's going to be in with Michael Myers, has me very intrigued as to how that showdown is going to go. And I hope that it obviously is a tick up or two closer to the first one in this timeline that they've started. And in many ways, for me, is a moment of cinematic history, seeing the two of them come together to a head.
Again.
So,
all I have to say is that there's a lot from my perspective, there's a lot riding on the franchise with this new movie, because I've cooled off on the 2018 since I saw it. I still like it, but I cooled off. I came real high. Kills was terrible, and now I'm like, well, if this next one's terrible, it just retroactively makes me like that first one even more. So I hope it lands the plane.
Yeah.
I
may or may not have been spoiled on what happens in the ending. We'll not share that here. Won't even. But if where they say it's going to go actually does happen, then I will be very happy to see how that's executed. So.
I just want to see a duel of fates, Anakin versus Obi-Wan, but with Michael Myers and Laurie Strode for 2 hours. I'd be happy with that. Dalton Stewart, how about you? What are you most anticipating this year?
Well, I'm also excited about some of the big ones coming down the pipe. The Fablemans, obviously, who's not excited for that one. Glass Onion, the Knives Out sequel. But I wanted to highlight some movies in September that are coming out. There is some stuff in September that looks interesting. You've got Viola Davis and The Woman King from Gina Prince Bythewood, which, I mean, that looks fucking cool as heck.
It does.
And then you got Thandie Way Newton and God's Country, this neo-western.
I hadn't seen the trailer for that until 3,000 Years of War last night. I was like, holy cow, this looks incredible.
Yeah. And of course, being a fan of local band Chat Pile, when the title God's Country came up, I was Leo in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood pointing at the screen. I was like, hey.
That's
my
amazing.
friend made an album called that.
That's amazing.
But yeah, no, I think both of those movies releasing September 16th look really solid. Hopefully they get a little business going, because it's going to be a bleak few months for the movies. And I sure would like to continue to publicly see films exhibited.
Right.
I really hope this is not a bad enough 2 months to just kill exhibition entirely.
I mean, Regal seems to think it is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Just speaking of September releases, I will say we can't not mention Hocus Pocus 2.
I forgot.
I mean,
I kind of wish I
Is that
did.
going to theaters?
No,
Straight to
which is
Disney
another
Plus.
one of those ones where I'm like, guys, it has a cult following. We'll love it or not, like it is Halloween. So I mean, I feel like it would make money in theaters if they had the balls to do it. But
See, Laurent, here's the thing. Bob Chapek, or whatever he says his last name, CEO of Disney, he has to regularly make sacrifices to the Wall Street / streaming gods so that he can keep that number moving, that line moving up and to the right. And much like the Pixar films that also should have had a theatrical release, this seems like another one of those sacrifices.
And it's the sequel that was never going to happen. Like, it was like they've been talking about it, baiting it for decades, and it's finally happening. And it actually has the cast. It's not a made for TV movie. So, there has to rise a little bit of curiosity for the nostalgic 90s babies. So,
You know what's hilarious about that? That first movie actually was a flop at the box office.
it was. Critics hated it. And then,
Disney Channel, man, save that movie. Anyway, separate conversation. Real quick, Glass Onion in terms of blockbuster, quote unquote. I love Ryan Johnson. I've loved him since I saw Brick. And of course, I loved The Last Jedi. But I mean, even the first Knives Out, I thought was incredible. It was super fun. I just seeing him do more of those. I'm happy. Like, honestly, the fact that he's probably not going to make another Star Wars, unfortunately, is a little bit of a bummer. But the upside is he's making more Knives Out movies, and I think these are unique. They're special, and frankly, I don't even know if we would get Bodies per se if it weren't for Knives Out being such a massive runaway hit.
Sure.
Certainly helped, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, very excited to see Glass Onion and what he does with that film, and otherwise, I want to give a quick shout out to a movie coming out in October, The Banshees of Inisherin. I'm sorry, I said that wrong.
I think it's Inisherin.
Inisherin, yeah. This is the latest movie from Mark McDonough, who of course did 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, 7 Psychopaths, and my personal favorite, In Bruges.
Also my favorite, yeah.
And he's bringing the cast back because we got Colin Farrell back, we got Brendan Gleeson back, and we're throwing in Barry Keoghan because why not?
Because it's a deeply Irish movie, that's why.
So I have to say, anytime Martin McDonough shows up, I'm not saying he's always hitting home runs, but I always find myself having a great time and talking about the movie, usually for months after.
I'm pretty hyped for this one, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned it.
And I don't know, I'm just going to throw this out there. I get flack for this. I'm not saying it's my most anticipated by any stretch of the imagination, but, there is an Avatar sequel coming out, and I did really love the experience of seeing the first one in the theater. I don't know. It's more curious if this new one can create something like that again. And James Cameron, by my book, personally, I wouldn't say everyone agrees with this, I don't think he's made a bad movie yet. So... I'm not saying
right bad now.
Yeah, exactly.
He hasn't. Caleb, 13 years ago, I bet against Jimmy. I'm betting against him this time, and I'll probably be wrong again.
Hey, man,
I love to bet against Jim.
Everyone loves to. They did the same thing with Titanic. They're like, Titanic's way over budget. It's taking too long to make. There's no way anyone wants to see a movie about a sinking ship, and yet... there it was.
Second highest gross movie of all time. And speaking of Avatar, I feel like we've kind of, the culture is kind of nickelbacked, Avatar, because I feel like when it came out, you couldn't hear anybody say anything bad about it. And now, years later, it's aged poorly. It's definitely taking things from different. But I agree with you. The young, youthful person that saw that movie in IMAX 3D was blown away by at least the spectacle of it. But that has, for me, worn off as the years have gone on and I've rewatched it at home. But that doesn't mean that I'm not a little curious to see what this multi-year film in the making sequel of the Avatar. I don't know why we need 4 more of these movies, but we'll see.
Only 2 of them are guaranteed right now.
It'll make the experience at the theme park that much richer because there'll be more rides to go and watch and experience the movie from.
That's another podcast as well, and I'm sure we will talk about it later on. You and I might even do a revisit of the first one because it is getting re-released in September.
Yeah.
I guess because they need to beat the Avengers Endgame at the box office for top of all time. But I'm excited. I am curious to revisit the first one. I know the story is not going to hold up, but the filmmaking I'm sure is great. But here's the thing: you bring it up though, LeRon. Nickelback is a great analogy, but here's the thing: is like everyone talks about how no one. Like there's no Avatar has no significance, but I feel like for at least the last 8 or 9 years, I've been like the fact that you're talking about that it has no impact tells me it has had an impact, and the fact that it has continuously occurred as these sequels have been pushed and pushed and pushed, and people are like, no one wants to see that, no one wants to see that, no one wants to see that, but you're still talking about it, so clearly you're at least a little curious, and if it makes half of the box office of the first one, it's still a runaway hit. So yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, we are out of time. Guys, this has been so much fun. Thanks so much for hopping on and talk about the movies you saw in August. Just really quickly, I want to go around the table to let our listeners know where they can keep up with you and your work. Dalton Stewart, we'll start with you.
I'm going strong for 10 years at the Good Trash Genre Cast. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary right now with a marathon of films that doesn't make sense that we haven't covered them yet. Things like John Carpenter's Escape from New York, one of our co-hosts, Dustin's favorite films, Ahazard Balthazar. So some Smokey and the Bandit, another one that doesn't make sense that we haven't covered. So that's what we're working on right now. But just a couple months ago, we got done with a top 100 countdown. We did a 5-part roundtable covering our favorite 100 films, and that was a ton of fun. So if you haven't listened to the show before, it's a good place to check it out. Podbean.com, Good Trash Genre Cast. We're on Apple, Stitcher. We're not on Spotify. I can't pretend it's for like a moral reason. It'd be cool if I could, but we've just never been on Spotify. So there was no moral reason to get off. It just has never happened. But yeah, Good Trash Genre Cast. Go check us out. We're on Twitter at Good Trash Media. And if you want to follow me, I can't imagine why you would want to do that, but I'm at doll_Stu over on Twitter.
All right. All right. Thanks so much. And again, congratulations on 10 years. That is
Thank you.
No small feat.
That is
Most
impressive.
podcasts don't make it past like episode 3. They get burned out or realize, crap, this is actually real work to keep it up, Charles Elmore, where can people keep up with you and your work online?
I guess I'm only on 2 places really. I'm on Twitter at 918_Charles, and I'm on Instagram at ChazElmore_DOP. It's a lot of boring pictures of the sunset and sunrises, but occasionally on my Instagram stories is where I will post quick takes on movies I see, and this is about as close as you'll get to a review in the moment from me online at the moment. But yeah, ChazElmore_DOP, but that's it.
I beg to differ. I actually really like your Instagram. I think it's a quality follow. So listeners, I do suggest if you're on Instagram to follow Charles. LaRon Chapman, how about you?
I can't compete with Dalton with 10 years, but I've been going 14 years strong on the old Book of Faces. So you can follow me on old Facebook under my name, LaRon Chapman. If you want to read my reviews, you can follow me on Letterboxd at black_Senna_man.
All right. And of course, you can find everything we do here at the Cinematropolis and on the Cinematic Schematic at the cinematropolis.com. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/the-Cinematropolis or on Twitter at the Cinematrop. And me personally, I'm tweeting about movies and television shows and sometimes video games whenever I have time to play those at C Masters Talk. That's the letter C Masters Talk. Right now, as I alluded to earlier, House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spinoff, successor series, prequel, whatever you want to call it, has been occupying a lot of my time. We just released, we were doing weekly recaps again. There was a very genuine, honest question about whether we were going to come back this year, after wrapping up Game of Thrones, and we're going to give it a shot this season. If it's good, we'll probably keep it going. If it sucks, we're probably going to be done forever. Regardless, you should head on over and follow me. It's the Cast Beyond the Wall is the name of the podcast. If you want to hear anything I have to say about Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon in this case, LaRon Chapman, you were our guest on the pilot episode. So if you've watched the first episode, you can go hear Mia and LaRon, my other co-host Daniel Stoll, talking about that first episode. And we've got a number of other exciting guests lined up and the weeks ahead. So that is, again, the podcast is called The Cast Beyond the Wall. We also publish that on the Good Trash website.
That's true.
Website as well.
GoodTrashMedia.com. I didn't even think to plug my letterbox, by the way, LaRon. I think, I'm just Dalton Stewart.
I'm reading you.
I follow. We follow each other. Yeah, I'm Dalton Stewart over on Letterboxd.
And I am also C Master Talk.
You're C Master Talk on
yes.
Letterboxd? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Check it out there. That is a great place to follow and keep up with your friends on movies. And I just wish everyone was using it, frankly.
I do too.
Yeah.
But honestly, the more people I can convince to hop on the Letterboxd train, the happier I'll be.
Yeah. It just makes life easier as a movie watcher. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I remember what I saw 2 movies ago, but pretty much everything before that, I'm like, oh, wait, what was it I saw like 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it's great. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and we'll catch you again next time. Until then, have a happy Labor Day, and we'll talk soon.